The city bus was packed with passengers on a warm afternoon. The seats were filled, and people stood along the aisle, gripping metal poles to keep their balance. The air inside felt thick, an odd mix of chatter, the smell of fuel, and the faint rustle of paper bags. It was just another busy day in a small town. In the middle of the bus, a young man in his early 20s, wearing a baseball cap and headphones around his neck, sat slouched in his seat. His sharp tones sliced through the hum of background noise. "Why do you keep forgetting things, Mom?" he snapped, shaking his head. "It's honestly embarrassing." Beside him, his mother, a woman in her 60s with soft, graying hair and a gentle face, lowered her gaze to the floor. Her hands fiddled nervously with her worn handbag. "I'm sorry, Lucas," she murmured. "I thought I packed it." Her voice was soft, barely audible over the rumbling of the bus. But Lucas wasn't done. He scoffed loudly, drawing the attention of nearby passengers. "You always forget stuff. It's like you're not even trying." No wonder Dad left. Passengers who heard his words exchanged uneasy looks. Some whispered to each other, while others stared ahead, pretending not to notice. Yet no one stepped in. At the back of the bus sat a quiet man, tall and broad-shouldered, with a calm but firm presence. He wore a simple black jacket, and though he didn't stand out at first glance, there was a quiet authority about him. His name was Mr. Walker, though no one here knew that. His sharp eyes flicked toward Lucas, but he stayed silent for now. Lucas continued, his voice rising as frustration bubbled over. "You're impossible. Why can't you ever get anything right?" His mother flinched but didn't reply. Her trembling hands clutched her bag tighter, and her shoulders hunched as though she wished she could disappear. Around them, the air felt heavier, the bus quieter, every passenger waiting for someone to speak up. Finally, Walker stood. His steps were deliberate as he walked down the aisle. The bus seemed to hold its collective breath. He stopped a few feet from Lucas and spoke in a calm but firm voice. "Young man, may I ask you something?" he said, his deep tone cutting through the tense silence. Lucas blinked, startled. "What's it to you?" he shot back, though his voice wavered slightly. Walker ignored the sharpness in Lucas's tone. Instead, he looked at the older woman, his expression softening. "Ma'am," he said gently, "you've raised a fine son, but it seems he's forgotten how to treat the person who gave him everything." Lucas squirmed in his seat, his earlier confidence slipping. "What are you even talking about?" he muttered. Walker took a step closer, locking eyes with Lucas. "You remind me of a boy I once knew," he said. "He had a good mother, too, but he didn't see it until it was too late." The passengers leaned in, drawn to the weight of Walker's words. Even Lucas couldn't look away. Walker continued, his voice steady. "I was a soldier, spent years in places I wouldn't wish on anyone. But no memory haunts me more than the day I stood over my mother's grave, wishing I'd told her how much she meant to me." The bus was silent now, the only sound the hum of the engine beneath their feet. Walker's gaze didn't waver. "I used to think I had all the time in the world," he said. "But life doesn't wait. And when she was gone, all I had left were regrets." Lucas's jaw tightened, his bravado completely gone. His eyes darted to his mother, who sat quietly, tears streaming down her face. Walker softened his tone. "Don't wait until it's too late. You have a chance to make things right. Don't waste it." Lucas sat frozen, his head bowed. After a long moment, he whispered, "I didn't mean to hurt you, Mom. I was just mad." His mother looked up, her teary eyes meeting his. "I know, Lucas," she said softly. "But hearing you say this, it means everything." The tension in the bus eased as Lucas reached for his mother's hand. "I'll do better," he promised. "I mean it." Walker nodded, a faint smile playing on his lips. He stepped back, returning to his seat as murmurs of approval rippled through the passengers. As the bus rolled to a stop, Lucas stood, guiding his mother toward the door. The passengers parted to let them through, some offering kind smiles. Before stepping off the bus, Lucas turned back to Walker and nodded. "Thank you," he said quietly. Walker simply tipped his head in acknowledgement. The bus pulled away, the quiet chatter returning. But the moment lingered, a reminder to everyone aboard of the importance of kindness, forgiveness, and making the most of the time we have with those we love. As the bus continued its journey, the passengers remained quieter than before, each lost in their own thoughts. The tension that had gripped the bus moments ago was gone, replaced by a reflective stillness. Conversations were softer, smiles exchanged more freely, and the shared sense of humanity among the passengers seemed almost palpable. Walker leaned back in his seat, staring out the window as the cityscape blurred past. His expression remained calm, but there was a subtle satisfaction in his eyes, a quiet pride that came from knowing he had made a difference. He wasn't one for dramatic speeches or drawn-out lessons, but he understood the power of a well-timed truth. Words could cut deep, but they could also heal when used wisely. Across the aisle, a young woman nudged her friend. "That was incredible," she whispered. "Did you see the way that guy just shifted? Like he finally got it?" Her friend nodded, her phone still clutched in her hand. "Yeah," she said softly. "I was going to post it, but I don't think this belongs online. It's not about views or likes. It's just something people need to feel, you know?" Meanwhile, a man near the front adjusted his tie, his mind miles away. He thought about the phone call he hadn't made to his own mother in weeks, the excuses he had made to himself. Work was busy, the days were long, and there was always tomorrow. But Walker's words echoed in his mind. "Life doesn't wait. I'm calling her tonight," he murmured to himself, a renewed determination sparking in his eyes. The bus rolled to Walker's stop. He stood, adjusted his jacket, and nodded politely to the driver as he stepped off. The sunlight bathed him in a warm glow, and for a moment, he simply stood there, watching the bus pull away. Inside, the passengers craned their necks to watch him. Though he didn't know it, he had left an indelible mark on each of them. His actions had sparked a ripple, a quiet call to reflect on their own lives, their own relationships, and the words they might be holding back. As the bus faded into the distance, Walker began to walk down the familiar streets of his neighborhood. His steps were unhurried, his thoughts steady. He knew that what had happened on the bus wasn't just about Lucas or his mother. It was a reminder of something universal. Respect, forgiveness, and love weren't just ideals. They were choices, ones we had to make every day. Behind him, life on the bus continued, but it wasn't quite the same. Strangers exchanged glances, their expressions softer, more open. The young girl who had lowered her phone finally tucked it away, her eyes lingering on the spot where Lucas and his mother had been. Sometimes it takes a quiet act of courage to remind us all of what truly matters. Walker didn't think of himself as a hero, just a man who believed in speaking up when it counted. But for those passengers, his words were a spark that changed the course of their day, maybe even their lives. And in a small, unassuming way, that was heroism too.